Go. Sorry?
This was under there.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's just sitting under
that
there.
is.
All right, so for those of you who showed up today, I think I've got enough of these, as well as a book for you.
Nice.
I'll save that to the end. If you don't know who David, do you know who David Bach is? The Automatic Millionaire? I got books for you. Just for showing up and listening to me blah, blah, blah on a Sunday morning. Okay, so have any of you guys listened to the money clip? Do you know what the money clip is? One? All right, well, you're going to have to now, because if you want a book, if you want a puck. So what this is being all recorded, so I better shut up.
And streaming to the internet.
Pardon?
And
Streaming?
streaming.
Yeah. Streaming, great. Make me more nervous. So thanks for coming, and I'm here to talk about the corporate podcast. And what I wanted to start off with first is sort of where Scotiabank didn't want to go. How many people know of the notion of the talking horse? Oh, good. I get to explain it to everybody. The talking horse is this theory or this idea that, well, it doesn't really matter what the horse is saying, it's talking, and that's good enough. I'm actually surprised because I got the idea of the talking horse from PodCamp Boston. I wasn't there, but Mitch Joel was, and we're buddies, and he was mentioning how somebody said that. And when I was doing the launch up to my personal podcast, I was thinking, talking horse, it's okay, just say something and get it out there. But for a corporation, that's a pretty serious thing. It's not a personal podcast, it's going out to the world. So, that issue really loomed large for us. And as a brand, we just couldn't jump into this and say, we'll figure it out later. We couldn't be that talking horse. So we had to really have something that meant something to people, and we couldn't produce it and work the kinks out kind of later on as we went. So in the public domain, it had to make sense for us as a brand. It had to make sense for our listeners and why they would actually come to our podcast. So, a bank is an unlikely player in this field. We really are. How many Canadians are there here? Okay, so the vast majority. So, Canadian banks, American banks are much more fractured, and there's, they're so regional. Well, in Canada, we have, like 5 banks? And we're all stodgy and conservative, and we don't do anything that the other guy's not doing. So, what in the name of service fees are we doing with a podcast? And, so what I want to talk to you today about is how we planned and how we launched this and why it made sense for us. And I'd like to convince you that we really aligned this tightly with our brand and our core proposition within the financial services space. And what I'm going to do is go through the ways that we actually looked at how to launch a podcast, what to do with it, and how it works. So the first thing is, what is our raison d'etre for you Canadians? That's French. I butcher my French. So, really what we wanted to look at was, again, this core reason for being, this compelling proposition that we had for going into this space. And we had to remain cognizant that this is like we said in the last panel session, that there's a bandwagon aspect to all this, that it's really not about just jumping on it and saying, whew, we got a podcast, we got a blog, let's go crazy. We wanted to make a mark in this space, and we didn't want to just be a flash in the pan. We did not want to become a pod fader. So the first thing that we did to ensure our success really was to make sure that we had a reason for being there. Now, the second thing that we had to look at was to adhere to the spirit of podcasting. And you heard in the last session, if you were there, that you don't want to turn your podcast into an advertisement or a shill for your products and for your services. But let's not kid ourselves. We're a big bank. We don't just do things on a lark. We don't jump into a space and say, like I said earlier, we'll figure this out. So there has to be some sort of payoff. There has to be some sort of reason that we were going to get into it. And, senior management, you can tell them, yes, it's cost effective. It's really not as proven a strategy yet. But we had to convince people that, although this is an emerging communication stream, that we had to somehow link it to a revenue stream somewhere down the line. So how did we do it? How did we ensure that we were successful? There's a third way, was to really communicate to executive that the rules here are pretty much different, slightly different, right? The goal was really to showcase our brand and tangibly demonstrate what we mean when we walk into a boardroom and we see our mission statement saying, we're the bank that helps Canadians become better off financially. Well, what does that mean? How do we articulate that in the marketplace? Well, in the marketplace, for those of you who are Canadian, you know that our positioning is we're the bank that helps you find the money. You're richer than you think. That's Scotiabank's sort of core proposition. So what are our proof points around that brand? And if we're going to get into podcasting, that's got to become a proof point of it. So what we really wanted to do with the podcast genre was offer sound advice, right? It's a nice little catchy way of saying it. We were going to actually call it sound advice, and then we realized that I listen to CBC, and I'm usually doing some cooking on a Sunday afternoon. They have a show on classical music called Sound Advice, so we had to nix that out. But my belief was actually that if we did this right, we would create this thing called the halo effect, and the halo effect would have some strategic byproducts. The first byproduct being creating greater loyalty with our customer base. The second would be spreading this word of mouth value. Everybody wants to get to that place with their brand in terms of spreading word of mouth. And then the last way was, somewhere down the line we were going to generate incremental business through it. And the other thing in terms of selling it through to executive is we have a rather middle-aged CEO. He's not too old, he's not too young, and he has kids, and those kids have iPods, and those kids listen to podcasts. So in terms of getting him involved and understanding the reason that we were getting into the space, he sort of got it. So brings up the whole reason that we got into this was to make sure that we had success. We had to base it around content. And our digital strategy was always to create compelling and unique content in the space. How many know who Crispin Porter Boguski is? Okay, how many of you have seen Subservient Chicken on the internet? Or how many have seen that creepy Burger King dude that's like wakes up in bed with you? Or how many of you have seen the Volkswagen commercial where two guys are driving down the street and all of a sudden they crash the car, right? That's all their advertising. And what the CEO of Crispin Porter Boguski has said is marketers who create content that is so motivational, that is so useful that consumers are not willing to live without it will find success. And so I love this quote because this quote backs up kind of everything I've done in the digital space for the bank, because our starting point was set many years ago when we created a digital newsletter for the bank that I'm going to get into in a second and explain through. And it really has, this content play has set us apart from the crowd in digital marketing. There's no other bank, I believe, that has what we have in terms of the breadth and depth of the library of content that we have, the way that we speak to our consumers, the way that we add value to the equation. And we've created, over the past 5-6 years, a continuous dialogue. So, but how did we do that, right? In terms of background and understanding who we are as a bank, we need to separate ourselves from this whole notion of demographics, psychographics, segmentation, and what do I mean by that? Well, we have some key insights on our potential audience, but they're sort of ubiquitous across the Canadian landscape, in fact, across the world. We all love money, right? Do we agree about that? If you don't, then come see me after and I'll take some of yours. But we want money to be simple. We want to get ahead with our finances, but that simplicity and that love of money doesn't translate into control of it. It doesn't mean that we know anything more about it. We are all of us, okay? And if you're not, I'd like to see you after. We're all confused, we're all emotional, and we're all pretty much out of control with our money in certain aspects. No one person I've ever met has it all teed up. Actually, there's one guy I met. You wouldn't want to meet him. Sorry?
But could we meet names?
Yeah, you could, but you wouldn't be better for it, trust me. We all, he's extremely well buttoned down in all aspects of his life. But we all seek to do things better in this space, right? We all want to touch our money in a way that we touch it and we affect it and we make more of it. It doesn't touch us and affect us and we feel less for it. So whoever in this space can help demystify and break down the subject matter is going to be a trusted friend in this space, and that's what we want to become. So we started out, and this was what I was alluding to before, a huge part of our approach in podcasting was really having the basis and having an audience and knowing what worked with them already through a newsletter. We began building this trust back in 2001, and we launched our podcast on this solid foundation of knowing that, like, what the core audience would need. So just to get into the vault for a couple of minutes, and you'll see I have a bunch of hucks here for you that you can take at the end. 6 years ago, we began using email in the digital channel as a way to stimulate a dialogue with our customers and with prospects. And the Vault is a free digital monthly newsletter. We base it on permission to communicate with our customers, and we don't send it spam. We don't send spam it to our customers. We really ask them, would you like to receive this email? And we welcome them to the program. And then we open up the library of content, which I'll get to in a minute. But we have now over 1.1 million permission-based subscribers to the service. And what we do really at the core is we educate on personal finance. We help people truly get ahead financially, delivering that brand message as a proof point. And we deliver this valuable information without a sales pitch attached to it, right? It's just the content that's there. And we have a 97% retention rate with our audience to prove that this strategy really has worked with us. And again, we launched this in, I believe, 2001. So what's in the Vault? What is it made up of? It's a broad stroke across personal finance. It's a digital library from investing to saving to home ownership. In fact, we're coming out with some articles around, like, so you're buying a home, how do you have it inspected, right? What bank would tell you how to have, your home inspector, what to check for? You can become your own inspector. You usually don't get a home inspector. I'll go on this tangent for a second. You will go and buy a home or look at a home, but how do you know when you're going through it for the first time if it's sound, right? You're not going to drag an inspector with you every Sunday when you're going to look at a new house or potential property. So, if we can advise on those types of things, we are really adding value. And from an editorial standpoint, again, the integrity of content has to make total sense for us, and it has to be very neutral. But we do drive, contextual marketing messages when we have the opportunity, right? If we're talking about home ownership, we will point them towards maybe our mortgage calculator. So in other words, we're a bank, so it's neutral and objective to a point, and then we actually make it hopefully more hard-hitting for them to see what else we have available. So, yeah.
You mentioned contextual marketing. How do you exactly do that?
In the newsletter, if the content in the newsletter is about home ownership, 10 ways to make sure the home you're buying is safe and sound. Underneath it, we will have a link to our mortgage calculator or to the resources that we have on our public website.
So it's more passive as opposed to you trying
Yes,
to find out when.
yes, very much so. Oh, I should mention, though, that when we do collect an email address from a customer, we know who that customer is. So if Terry is a customer of the bank and he signs up, I'm a database marketer and direct marketer by background, and we turn that into a relationship through the electronic channels.
What would we guess? It would be helpful for me if you could intro by taking a stab at what you think it is differentiates Scotiabank's conservative stuffing management from the 5 other big Canadian banks.
I think that's,
conservative stuffing management.
I'd say the ability for us to get into this space, to deliver added value content, to have another reason for talking to the Canadian public in a way that benefits them, and it's like a non-zero sum approach to marketing. We're giving to get.
But what's the belief system of the management that's different?
I think culturally we're just a much more, I don't know, I really can't speak to the other banks and I don't want to downplay them. I can speak to our culture at Scotiabank is really oriented around helping our customers and prospects to the bank become better off financially. So we orient our products around that. We orient sort of the way we all work together. Our mantra internally is one team, one goal. So I really can't speak to the other banks, but I know that we all sort of rally together to, and I'd say what comes out of our bank as a public-facing communication or deeper play to consumers is stuff like this. Okay, so this is our content. Again, it crosses a wide range, and we make it evergreen. And I mentioned in the last session that 5 years from now, you should find content from 5 years ago that's still relevant and still good. And so it's evergreen. In the latest buzzword, the long tail, I kind of speak to the long tail of our content, right? It's out there. It's got to work. It's got to work overtime for us into the future. So it brings up the point of the whole speech here is, so why did we get into podcasting? Well, it's really for all those reasons, right? And to answer your question, sorry, Jerry?
Jerry.
The reason why we felt podcasting would work for us is because it's just another extension of this core value proposition that we have as a bank. And we knew it would work for us because we were building it on the equity of what we had already in the vault. Sorry for the pun, I love using that. But it's an extension, it's a natural evolution, and it enhances the overall digital experience, right? And the cost, because we've proven that we have an ROI to our digital marketing, to our email strategy, the ROI here is just, it's kind of crazy when you look at the numbers of cost versus revenue generation. So the Money Clip was born, and the Money Clip is, again, the sound advice, objective, and educational content. I'm the host, so now you know why the talking horse thing really didn't work for me. I got a big enough head as it is, so I don't need any horse references. Well, my role in digital marketing was really to ensure that when we entered into this space, it was going to be done with that core purpose, with that background, with that understanding of how we can make a difference, how we wouldn't be outed by all you folks in the room who would, I like to say the social media mavens would love to jump on us and kick us while we're down if we did this wrong. So, in my experience in podcasting and commenting on my own podcast and co-hosting the most wonderful Insider PR over the summer, which I was the most nervous little wreck for like the entire weekend. Thank you. But it was really getting into it, and I guess getting over the idea of hearing my own voice, which my wife has already gotten over many times. So I got immersed in this area, and that was really my reason for having, I guess, hooks into it. And the Money Clip was developed in conjunction with one of Canada's top podcasters, Mitch Joel, who I'm sure you've all seen around here. So I'd like to think the two of us sort of knew a little bit about this. Mitch and Twisty Maj is my digital agency at the bank. And I must also say that thank you to Steve Jobs. He created the red Nano just as we were coming out with this, so it was like, yeah. And then, perfect timing, right? We couldn't have aligned the stars any better. And to make things even better, they designed the new little shuffle. And what does it look like, right? A clip, the Money Clip, thank you. Steve Jobs, working overtime for Scotiabank. Now remember, so now I'm going to get into the, really the core of what we went through when we were developing it. And we had to understand that the three ways that people were going to enjoy this content, that not everybody has an iPod, not everybody has the ability to download. So listen via streaming. That's one of our biggest ways that people get our content is off of our site. You can come and download the episode as an MP3 because not everyone can subscribe to iTunes and have it show up in their iPod right away. And in fact, myself, up to a little while ago, I didn't even have an iPod. I just had like the little creative piece. And so you got to make sure that everybody has the ability to listen to what you're getting out there. And I would love it if you would subscribe to iTunes when you do sign up, because that ratchets us up on the ranking. We have 22 episodes so far. We went through sort of the interview format with mutual funds. We addressed beginner mutual funds, intermediate mutual fund, and advanced mutual funds with an inside expert from the bank. We then went through the stock market with one of Canada's leading authorities. The guy's on TV. We're lucky enough to have him at Scotiabank. His name is Fred Ketchen. And Fred is like one of these staples I think he's been around since the stock market started. He's the sweetest guy. He's so knowledgeable. And it was like turning the tables on this guy and interviewing him was just amazing. So, but we didn't talk about what Scotiabank is with the stock market. What we really talked about was the history of the stock market. How social events like 9/11, like the assassination of JFK, how they affect the stock market, and then sort of how the stock market has grown over time. And then we did 2 minutes to a better RSP, which was very timely. That was just me hosting and doing 2-minute clips on what do you need to know about building your RSP portfolio. And for any Americans in the audience, that's sort of akin with the 401k. So our results. As a corporation, what are a few indicators of our metrics? And the first one is our ranking on iTunes. And that's really, I gotta say, I never really thought that the rankings on iTunes would mean a lot, but visually, for senior executive, man, do they buy into stuff when they see you bang at #1. So we were at #1 for a while, and we continue to sort of hit the top 5 with each episode. People are subscribing, they're downloading, but when you consider our competition is in that space is like the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, Business Week, Harvard Business Review. I'd like to think we're doing something kind of cool in that space when we're ranked, within #1 or the top 5 within the iTunes business category. The second is the traffic metrics to our site, our downloads. Third is the amount of people that are actually indicating to us. I don't know how we tell this. My team tells me that we have a lot of people that are indicating that we're their favorite. So they're bookmarking us as a favorite. The fourth, and most important really to me, is the feedback from our customers, from our prospects, and internally from employees. Scotiabank is one of the most international banks, or is the most international bank in Canada. We're all over the world. Something like, they used to have a stat here, but something like dozens and dozens and dozens of countries that we're in, 57,000 employees around the world. I get calls from all over the world from people saying, hey, we love it, can you do one in our language, or can you do one for our marketplace? I have to tell them that I'm not in international marketing, but I do know those folks, and maybe they can help out. But so that's really one of the indicators. And as I mentioned before, that the last indicator is the social media mavens syndrome. You know, check out Technorati, check out what they have to say about the money clip. It's all pretty much positive stuff. So the accolades are there. I don't know how to use Photoshop, so there's no way I could have dummied up this screen. I'm not that talented. But you can see there that, you know, in terms of visual impact for senior executive at the bank, I mean, this is a PowerPoint slide, and you know, they're not all aligned with iPods and iTunes. They don't get the whole thing, a lot of them. But when you put up a visual like this, and we've got Business Week, we've got Harvard Business Review, and Mad Money Machine. I mean, they all know these people, right? Zig Ziglar. If you don't listen to Zig Ziglar, it's really interesting what he's got to say.
Are you ranked number one, Canada or total?
It's Canada. It is Canada. It's hard for me to understand on the charts, the U.S. charts. I don't know. There's got to be some way in iTunes that you can flip it over and see. Someone told me it once, but yeah, it is Canada.
Another quick question, actually. The favorites. You said the high percentage of people turning in their favorites. Where do you get that metric from?
That's a good question. My team has it.
But I mean, does it come through like Alexa rankings, or like where do you?
It may. I have.
Do you know how many people like add you as if they were delicious, or how?
I believe, yeah, it should be delicious.
Is it delicious?
Yeah.
I have a superstar. She was here yesterday. A superstar team member. I'm the idiot that just dreams up this stuff and then needs other people to implement.
It's a useful stat. I just don't.
Yeah. You know what? I'll give you my business card after, and I will let you know how we got that. I'm sure that if she said it, it's somewhere. Now I'm embarrassed. You know, also, let's move on to another metric. Sorry, did you have a question back?
Maybe you're getting into it, just the sort of obvious question, so how did you get to the top, other than the content itself?
That's a good question. We have a 1 million+ base that we sent the message out to. Said, download, subscribe, you know, come and get this content. So we had that, again, on that core audience proposition. We had an audience to speak to. And then once it was out there, we had, and you'll see in a second, I'm going to go through some of the comments, I believe that we've hit that sort of real word-of-mouth value proposition.
Doesn't iTunes rank you by recent subscriptions?
Yes.
Not like downloads, but it's your growth?
I don't know what the actual algorithm is in iTunes, but I do know that, yes, subscriptions plays probably the larger part of that algorithm. And we are averaging enough daily new subscriptions to keep us sort of at the top. Okay? But then again, you know, if we were just there once and we didn't come back, we would have gone all the way down. I've seen that with my personal podcast as well. Every time I release a new edition, you know, it does go up, so new people are subscribing. So, you know, this is always good for senior management when the Marketing Magazine, which is our Canadian ad age, calls and they want to do an interview, and especially when we've got a new senior vice president, and he's being called about the project that my team is running with. So we get some notoriety there across the world. So this is an interview that we did with London-based publication called Bank Marketing International. If you're not in bank marketing, you don't want to read this, trust me. But Scotiabank, top of the pods, a play off of the top of the pops. You know, it's talking about, and they really got it because they actually started talking about the vault in the context of where this whole podcast came from. And we were one of the first. I don't want to make this claim that we were the first bank, but we were one of the first. And I can guarantee you, we were the first to really tackle this area with a great background in content. So word of mouth, right? That's what we all really do it for. These are actual, this isn't my mom writing in, this isn't friends or staff members. I'd like to think that we're increasing the likelihood of investing with Scotiabank when we get people writing in and saying, and calling in as well, and saying it's an excellent idea informing novice mutual fund investors like myself. I know the first 2 episodes, I mean, you can read it, I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but keep up the great work and I just may move my funds over to you, right? There you go. Building loyalty, right? That was another moniker of what we wanted to do. I enjoyed parts 1 and 2 and I can hardly wait for part 3. Hardly wait? We're bank. Wait. I,
You're so
I,
used to waiting in the
yeah.
back.
I look at this and I'm like, are they going to believe me when I send this out? But trust me, when you do send out these types of, when you open up the channel of dialogue and you want to hear what people say, we're going to be spinning some of these comments and questions into content for the money clip. And there's a call to action at the end, but I would encourage you to call my podcast, the client side, blog.com. There's all the information there, or come see me after, and we'll and I can help answer any questions that you might leave with after here. But I'm a Scotiabank client, but not for mutual funds, ... yet, right? Creating new conversations. What advice can you give me about selecting an index to purchase funds for? Thanks. Okay, so people asking us, how can you sell something to me, please? Adding true value. It's relevant info that each of us can use. It shows concern for our financial well-being, right? We're the bank. Again, back to that statement, what in the name of service fees are we doing with a podcast? Well, apparently we're doing something that shows concern for their financial well-being. We're helping them get ahead. It always provides, and this is back to the vault as well as the money clip, it provides something of interest and current information of value. Thanks again for this helpful source. Thanks for your kindness and very helpful tips and great information, very practical stuff.
You have a lot of opportunities to send new products or whatever comes through those comments. How do you integrate your activity with the rest of the bank?
That's a good point. There's a much deeper connection that we have in digital marketing. Again, my background is relationship, database marketing. I work within the larger group that does advertising and branding. So we connect the dots because, again, it is, we know who we're speaking with digitally. It's a great question. How do we connect the podcast to it? Back to the halo effect. It's really, with products and services, we're being product and service neutral here. But again, if we do this right, and I hope this answers your question, if we do it right, you may pay more attention to the products and services that we have at the bank because we're giving you all this for free. There's a greater reason for doing business with us. Does that answer the question?
For example, if someone has a question about the mutual fund, are you going to pass it along?
Oh yes, sorry, I gave you the $50 million answer to the when you all you needed was a $2 answer. Yes, we do pass it along to the internal experts at the bank. They help us to qualify and quantify what it is that we send out back to the customer, and we do it lightning fast.
Now, are these slides available?
Yes, they are.
From
For a price. Yes, they are. You can. I'm doing a Joe Jaffe here, Terry. I'm going to hold all this hostage because I want comments and I want to like really start a dialogue around. There's not that many corporations that are doing podcasting. I'd like to take this sort of these questions and these, yes, the quick answers. I will give it out. I will make it available, and but I'd like to start this dialogue around. How did a corporation get into it and really talk around this type of stuff, what you need to look out for, through my blog. So I will, yes, come see me after. I'll give you my card. I can send you.
We can do better than just dialogue. If you want to be an author of a book on the subject, we'll publish it.
Okay.
You heard it here first.
All right, you heard it here, everybody. Turn the camera around. I want to get facial recognition of Jerry. But yeah, definitely. I mean, these slides are. I'll make them available. Okay. Suleiman in the back.
Yeah, sorry, Mike, came a little late, so I don't know if you covered this already. How did you, and I can talk maybe later get the slides, how did you convince Scotiabank to do a podcast? Because I work for a large corporation as well, and they'd look at me flying from Mars if I told them to do a podcast.
We did already cover that, so
okay.
no tardiness in the future.
Okay.
I can talk to you after about it. It really was about convincing them of the merits of what we already had been doing with the newsletter. And the value we would add and the conversations we would generate, and also sort of having my personal experience in the podcast world and social media, becoming, I guess, the de facto expert within the bank.
Your kids told me it was cool.
Yeah, exactly. Our CEO has young kids, that's it.
But just extending on that point, did you also, though, set up some initial metrics that you wanted to see to say that, yes, we're being successful, or no, we're going to stop?
We have, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but we have a lot of metrics because of our direct and database foray into the whole digital space. So basically when I said, look guys, this is not going to cost a lot of money, there's really no risk because we're taking what is written content that we've had for years and we're just going to make it available through an audio stream. The risk was not there, the cost was not there. So, you know, when we started getting those comments that you saw, then everybody said, oh, that's great, you know. And to me, it's just about another extension of how we tangibly, again, demonstrate our brand. So it's really hard to put a direct revenue stream into it. But, you know, when we get those, now it's kind of easy when people say that. I'll say, well, look at those comments we're getting in. And if you think, like, my whole goal was you're sitting at a dinner party, right? And talking about stuff and personal finance and banking comes up and the usual bank bashing will go on. Oh, my ABM fees, or, you know, this or that or whatever, performance of mutual funds. So what else do we have to add to the equation that is not commoditized, right? It's not a product commodity. So you're sitting across the table and somebody says, I bank with Scotiabank and I listen to their podcast or I get their digital newsletter, or, you know, they really have something behind their brand positioning of find the money or helping you're richer than you think, right? And so I think we do it. I want to go through these and then maybe we'll hold questions just for a few moments. So the top 10, in a David Letterman type fashion, the top 10 things to keep in mind when your company is getting into the podcasting space. The first one would be your raison d'tre, right? Your whole reason for being. What is your DNA to get into this space as a corporation? We heard the example of Whirlpool. You know, their corporate DNA is different than what they're doing on their podcast, but they're adding value, so they have a reason and a compelling opportunity to be there. Spirit of the medium, right? Podcasting is not about advertising and being a show for your product, so know that before you get into it. Third, content, content, content. Same thing as real estate, right? Location, location, location. It's very important that you have your content strategy down. Frequency, don't become a pod fader. If you're going to get into the space and you're not going to do it just as a one-time deal, then you need to make sure that you have something coming down the pipe later. Choice, you need to make it available streaming, download, iTunes. Little things, right? Like your RSS feed, your show notes, your keywords for Google, your call-in number, open up the conversation, your email address, make that accessible, right? There's a lot of companies out there that not companies, but other podcasts venturing into the space where they don't have all of these points available. You know, if you don't want to, that's one thing, but at least know what you're saying no to or what you're leaving off the table. Sound quality, we record in the studio, we record at CBC. We're a big brand, it's not that much out of my budget to do it, and I think the consumers expect it. Metrics, as we just went through, aside from the one metric that I'm embarrassed to say I don't have the exact hooks on, I will get that to you later. But know what your metrics are, right? As June asked, what was the metric for? We had some metrics in mind, but we already had a basis for it through email and through digital marketing. Accessibility, preparedness, and responsiveness. You need to be accessible to your audience. You need to be prepared to answer questions, not just about the content, but we had people who were listening to it for the first time through iTunes, right? So they downloaded iTunes, they did it up, and they said, oh, you know, iTunes it's skipping, you've got problems with your podcast. And I know iTunes well enough to have fired back a note saying, you know, where you're running any software in the background, iTunes tends to be a memory hog, and if you're running anything else, it tends to skip. So the second I sent that back to them, I didn't have to send it to a technical help desk. I was prepared. We knew what we wanted to say. And answer questions about how do I get this onto my MP3, what is RSS? We needed to be able to address those questions. And responsiveness too. You know, this is an immediacy type of thing. If you're going to pull the old I'm not available over the weekend, you know, you may lose key influencers within your audience. And then again, the halo effect. Know what else you're getting into it for, right? Around your brand, you want to create this halo effect. Don't forget who your audience is, right? My dad has an iPod. That's a very scary thing. You wouldn't believe the technical calls that I receive on a weekend, right? So this young guy and this older gentleman all have the same reason for tuning in. And if my content is good enough, it will apply to both of them. And that's it. Thank you guys very much. I'll take a little